Good evening. On behalf of Sharon Stanley Merriweather, the president of Iota Lambda Omega's chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, I welcome you to Wealth Generation, a financial literacy workshop featured by the chapter's Building Your Economic Legacy Committee. I'm Ayanna Baker, co-chair of the committee and your facilitator for tonight's workshop on building generational wealth, which is the final Facebook Live series being offered this month. We are honored to have as our guest presenters this evening, Laura Bacon, a community advocate, educator, and entrepreneur. Laura worked in the Howard County Public School System for 15 years and is now the founder and CEO of The Third, a Howard County-based nonprofit that supports women of color entrepreneurs. And we also have with us today, Loretta Johnson, owner and CEO of Loretta Johnson State Farm Agency. Loretta is a State Farm honor agent who is licensed in property and casualty, life and health insurance, is a long-term care certified, and is a registered and financial representative with State Farm. She has served Maryland in insurance and financial services for over a decade. She is also a member of Iota Lambda Omega's Building Your Economic Legacy Committee. In terms of our learning objectives, the discussion this evening will focus on 5 areas. What is generational wealth? Why is generational wealth important? We're going to talk about the racial wealth gap in America between whites and blacks. Why does it exist? And how can this be changed? We're going to also talk about how to build generational wealth. And finally, how do you pass on wealth? So let's start the discussion by answering the question, what is generational wealth? Laura, can you help with this term?
I sure can. I can help a little bit. Generational wealth is wealth passed down from one generation to the next, often called like family wealth or legacy. We hear that a lot, legacy. If you're able to leave something behind for your children or to your grandchildren, then you are contributing to the growth of generational wealth for your family. Many things we're referring to are the financial resources that you leave behind. And this wealth can come in many forms: real estate, stock market, investments, life insurance. We're going to talk through all of it. Loretta and I will get into more detail onto many types of financial resources that are available for you to pass down to wealth in your for wealth in your family.
That's great. So before we get into the details on how to build wealth, let's answer this important question. Why is generational wealth so important?
Sure, I can help with that, Ayanna. Generational wealth is so important because it gives you a blueprint. It gives you a blueprint of starting your financial journey. Imagine this. I'll answer the question this way. Suppose you had your parents that actually paid for your college funds, and you didn't have to, when you graduate from college, have a huge debt. Mm-hmm. That is, you didn't have to worry about paying off large bills. Wouldn't that be a great way to start off generational wealth?
Yes.
You wouldn't have to start from scratch. You wouldn't have to start playing catch up on your student loans. You could start off by maybe saving for a home or saving for retirement. I say the why behind generational wealth is because it just gives you a blueprint on your financial journey. It's a great way to not have to really be digging out. Another way to think about the why of generational wealth is that whole idea of education. You know, we should now be thinking about how we want our kids' financial future to play out. When you're thinking about it, you're already putting in plans in place to set up those vehicles that can set your kids off to a huge start and not have to, what I call, be scratching out of debt.
That's right. Thank you. Already such valuable key things. I appreciate this, and I'm taking notes myself even as I facilitate this session. So already thoroughly engaged. So thank you. So now that we understand the why and what of generational wealth, setting up vehicles to secure the financial future of your children takes some education. Many of us have not thought about passing on wealth at all. Loretta, can you help us understand what else we need to know?
Absolutely. And this is a great time, Ayanna, to talk about the elephant in the room. Mm-hmm. There is a racial wealth gap. When I say a racial wealth gap, there was a huge study that was done by Ariel investment firm, head up by President and CEO Melody Hobson, who paired with Charles Schwab, that showed that there is a gap between white Americans and Black Americans in this so-called wealth gap. Why does that exist? 71% of whites invest in the stock market, whereas only 55% of Blacks do. That is a huge gap in the wealth gap. Why is this disparity? This disparity has compounded over time. And if it continues, African Americans are going to have less money to save for retirement, or less money to even thinking about passing on to their generation. So one of the things that Melody Hobson says is that we're really behind the 8 ball, and we really need to fix that. So one of the things that we want to talk about today, Laura and I, is to help us not to continue to be behind the 8 ball.
That's right.
So why is, not only do we want to overcome this disparity and this racial wealth gap, we want to educate ourselves so that we don't continue to have this economic lag where we're not able to fund for our kids' college education. We're not able to save for retirement. We want to be able to pass on generational wealth. So we wanted to get to the root of the problem and bring out the elephant in the room about this racial wealth gap. And we're going to talk about the how to get out of it in just a few moments.
Thank you so much. No, Loretta, your comment is reminding me of a quote that my dad used to have up in our home by Malcolm X, and it said, education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to the people who prepare for it today. So we need to educate ourselves, right? And this is it right here. So this conversation is so important. So now, what's a good way to start taking control of this problem, and to take steps to build generational wealth? What does that look like?
I mean, honestly, the concept of building generational wealth is easy. You acquire some assets or save cash that you don't intend to spend in retirement. And then you can pass those things on to your children when you pass away, or to other family members if you don't have children. It's critical to nail down, though, your retirement savings, your own retirement savings plan, and your other personal goals before you start to save for generational wealth. That's where Loretta comes in. And we're going to walk you through some of the best ways to start preparing to leave a legacy of wealth behind for your children and your grandchildren and your family. So one of the ways that I'll talk about that kind of, is in my wheelhouse is building a business to pass down. And it's a point that has so many benefits. The first point is building a business that you can leave to your children and set them up with assets, collateral, and leaving behind any of the profits that are earned. And that is a full shift in the system. Like, the system was not designed to make sure that we had generational wealth, that we had people to pass on things to. So we're talking about a full shift of the system in starting to do these things for ourselves. It is a new day. Talk with legal counsel. Talk with legal counsel to make sure you are ready that your business is ready to pass on to your children, or to involve them, to have them start working in it. And that's kind of leads me into the other benefit of having a business to pass down. One of the other benefits is just the act of building the business. It's hard to be what you can't see, and it's hard to go where you don't know. So I embody entrepreneurship every day for my kids. And I embody that mindset daily for my kids. We talk openly about business things that are happening in my business, and it spurs them on to think about maybe starting their own entity, or thinking about just deeper financial things than they would have before. The bottom line is the habits and mindset that develop are helpful towards creating generational wealth, regardless of whether your child's going to be an entrepreneur or not. So that's my first tip for sure. And the second one is to invest in your child's education. And there are a couple of very simple ways to do that. You can look into the different college accounts for your child. College costs and the debt that comes with it is a huge barrier to generational wealth. I believe we can all say an amen on that one.
Yes.
And if you could invest in a 529 plan, which is a college savings plan, or the tuition prepayment, it's a huge benefit for your child. And the idea is too, you don't have to have it all. maybe you can only contribute some. Start somewhere. Even if you're only contributing $5 a week, it accumulates over a child's lifetime towards being able to stave off this debt that they might incur. The other thing I'm going to say is to let's normalize not going to a four-year university as well.
Mm-hmm.
Extremely expensive and riddled with debt. Community college is a wonderful option. And there are also wonderful options, like we're right here in Howard County. Howard County Public Schools offers apprenticeships, ARL, career research and development classes. So we can also normalize work that doesn't include college. And they're all intended to prepare students for work after graduation. So encourage your kids to think about what life looks like, maybe even without college. How can you move forward without it? And let's normalize that. And then the last thing I would say is pull your kids in to be participants. As your kids are starting to be, like I have a 15-year-old, she's starting to think about her first job. I'm asking her to look, who gives tuition reimbursement? I know off the top of my head that Starbucks and Chipotle do. So if we're looking for a part-time job and a part-time job is a part-time job, might as well get one where you can get some tuition reimbursement as well.
All good points. Listen, it's all about the more you know. And so your point that stood out just now to me is just to start somewhere, right? Get started. It's not going to always be the perfect time or look the perfect way, but it's just important to start somewhere. So I appreciate that. We do have I see a question in the chat that says, when should you begin planning for passing assets to your children? Should you consult a financial advisor? If so, at what point?
Now, and I would like to take that one. I saw that one in the chat, and it's I think Anita McRae Williams asked that question.
Yes.
And I'll speak to that from a personal experience as well as speaking to it from a professional financial representative. I began planning for passing assets for my children the minute I found out I was pregnant. Mm-hmm. And I'm one of those parents that my kids were fortunate enough when they finished their 4-year college, they did not have debt because I started to think about it immediately. And that gets back to something Melanie Hobson said, is that generational wealth starts early and we are behind in the 8 ball. And one of the reasons is we don't talk about money around the table. For some reason, it's been kind of taboo. So we kind of inherited that. It's kind of innate. So we don't think about money and investing very early. When we start to think about it, sometimes it's a little bit late and we have to play catch up. So to answer the question, Anita Williams, you should start now, wherever you are in the juncture of your life. The now for you is now. For those of you who may have very small children and you haven't started, it is now. For those of you who may be expecting a baby, it is now while you're expecting. Because you'll hear as we get into some of the how-to and we get into investing, it is about the long game. You want the money working and investing for a long period of time. The more you have and the more time is in your favor for investing, the more you have to pass on. The second part of her question is, should you consult a financial advisor? You know, most of us are not experts when it comes to investing. And you really don't want to make financial mistakes because it's very costly. Certainly, if you can, I would encourage, yes, consult a financial advisor for a number of reasons. Many of us don't want to take the time to learn about all of the things we need to do so that we don't make mistakes. So consulting a financial advisor is good. I did, and it has worked wonders for me. I hope that answers the question just a little bit.
Thank you for that. So this is a great discussion, and I nod to all of that. My husband and I have also consulted a financial advisor, and it was really helpful to us. And we decided to pay off some debt first, and then we aggressively started saving. So and we've been saving for a few years for our children's college future. So thank you for that. We've learned 2 ways so far to build wealth. So one is to build a business to pass down, and the second way is to invest in your child's education. Loretta, you mentioned the racial wealth gap in the stock market. Can you speak more to those issues?
Yes, I can. Investing in the stock market is actually the third way to build wealth. We've already mentioned, and we'll probably mention it again, that 71% of whites invest in the stock market, 55% blacks. The stock market has the potential to give you the longest long-term growth, and it has for decades. The stock market is going to grow your money in amounts that's going to be very hard to earn if you just have a normal savings account or if you're saving on your own. It's just not going to happen. I'm not saying that having a saving account is not nice. It's a great step forward in managing your personal finance, but it's not going to land you in the same place to secure the kind of financial future that you would want to have to pass on funds for generational wealth. So why don't we as Black Americans invest in the stock market? There seems to be a fear. My advice is to get over the fear and learn how to invest. You don't have to learn every little thing about the market. You just have to have some basic knowledge. For example, you can start by investing in your company's 401k. Most 401k plans have a mixture of stocks and bonds and mutual funds. They are run by expert fund managers. So it gives you an opportunity to dabble a little bit in the stock market without having to have a lot of fear. Or you can take advantage of tax advantage accounts like an individual retirement account known as an IRA. I will share with you, this is when I got started. At age 21, I opened my first individual retirement account. We're not going to put names out there, but it was one of the large brokerage houses where I got started. I guess I had an old head at an early age, and it has paid off for me in leaps and bounds. It gets back to a question that Anita asked, when you should start. Investing your money early gives you the long haul game. I'm going to mention Warren Buffett, because Warren Buffett is one of the most successful investors in the world, which has made him not only one of the richest men in the world, he is the seventh richest man in the world because of his investment skills. I mentioned Warren Buffett because Warren Buffett says, when you put your money into investment, close your eyes and let it work for you for the long haul. I'll tell you what happened to me in 2008. Remember when the stock market crashed?
Mm-hmm.
I had an individual retirement account. I was in my 401k. Looking on paper, it looks like I lost about $10,000, $12,000, but that was paper money. It wasn't my money that I put in there. It was money that I earned. I closed my eyes, put the paper away, and the market will correct itself.
Yeah.
I have made that money over 3 times as much as I lost. So that's kind of one of Warren Buffett's advice. The other thing too is you don't have to know everything. It gets back to experts, seeking a financial advisor, going to a brokerage house. Or if you're working, I'm also a financial representative with State Farm. So if you are working with an insurance company and your agent is also a financial representative, they can help you. One of the things we do when we work for clients is we work for you. We understand your risk tolerance. By that, I mean, how risky are you? Are you going to be somebody that, oh my God, when you hear, oh, the Dow Jones dropped so many points, are you going to freak out? When you get your statements and your investments and you see that you may have lost, are you going to freak out? Or you have very little risk tolerance. So they work with you, understanding what your goals are and your risk tolerance, and they match you with those types of investments that works for you. If you are a beginner, another place to start is, I'll throw something out, a term called low-cost index funds. We're going to drop a resource in the chat that you can learn all about 101 investing in index funds. The reason we mention that for a beginner is it's very low fees, it's not as risky, it's not hard to learn, and it will offer you long-term growth. This is not a Loretta Johnson recommendation. I'll give that disclaimer. This is a Warren Buffett disclaimer. But we will give you some resources for that. That's drop in the chat. Also, another resource that we use in our research is Clever Girl Finance. Clever Girl Finance, that link has been dropped in the chat for you. We'll give you a one-on-one, step-by-step guide on how to get started, how to invest. Basically, what we're saying about the stock market, to answer your question, the third way is you have to start. You have to get over your fear, educate yourself, and just get started. And the last thing I'll say about that, which is very easy, is go with what you know. Many of you order from Amazon. Many of you drink Starbucks.
Mm-hmm.
Invest in the things where you spend your money. You don't have to buy thousands of shares. Start off with what you can afford and buy what you know. You'll be surprised how much your money will grow.
I would say I've heard that for sure. I've never been in investing. I didn't understand the world. But as the world was closing and people started talking about Zoom, I was like, you know what? Someone's going to make a lot of money on Zoom. And it was just for, for another perspective, because I'm not always the best at planning, but I like to, kind of catch up. I took my tax return and put $1,000 into Zoom, and it's quadrupled in a year's time. And that was just because I was having fun. When I did it on Cash App, I was able to buy the stock on Cash App. So I do, to Loretta's point, when we're talking about actually building something, building generational wealth, I think it's important to be intentional, to make a plan, to start thinking about it, but do know as well that there are ways to catch up. There are ways to start even now.
Absolutely. I see a question in the chat. Can you speak about CDs, are called certificates of deposits? There are many types of instruments or vehicles to investing. And again, it gets into your investment style and your investment goal. CDs are similar to what we call cash, or what we call more liquid money. So when you think of CDs, if you go to any bank or financial institution, the return on certificate of deposit is not that much. But if you're looking for liquidity, meaning I want to invest in something where I can get my cash readily, easily in 6 months, a year, or 2 years or 3 years, then CDs might work for you. If you're someone who wants to invest early so that I can have funds down the road for my kids' education or retirement, CDs might not be the right place for you. You want to invest where you can get the greatest of return. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on the way you look at it, it's going to have a little bit more risk, but you got to take a little bit more risk to get more return. So CDs are great investment for short-term investment and liquidity. But if you're looking for longer-term investment with more funds, you're going to probably take a little bit more market risk. Again, I hope that answers the question.
And Loretta, can you say a bit more about the fourth way to build wealth, a little bit about real estate? Do you want to share that with the group?
Absolutely. So the fourth way that we'll talk about for building wealth is through real estate. Real estate also provides long-term growth potential. And it's so reliable. It's a reliable path to building wealth because real estate appreciates over time.
Yes.
It has the potential for steady income flow. Now, we're not talking about folks going out there and trying to buy apartment buildings or office buildings and those types of empires. We're really talking about starting small. Most of us pretty much have purchased a home. And so you've dabbled into real estate. If you purchased your first home, or whether it's your second home, real estate or home buying is high on the list of wealth building because you can own that home for 30 years, pay it off, or even if you don't pay it off, it is a long-term asset that appreciates in value and that you can pass on to generations. I would like to put just kind of one tip or caution out there. If you have not yet purchased a home and you are going to become a first-time home buyer, avoid the trap of buying a home above your budget.
Mm-hmm.
The rule of thumb that I would like to give is to keep your mortgage payment no more than 30% of your income. You don't want to go over your head or go underwater. Another option as it relates to real estate is buying home to rent out, rental property. Rental property is a great investment because it pays for itself and also gives you a steady stream of income. Many folks out there are now getting into investment in other properties by buying homes, fixing it up, and what they call flipping it in the market, and then getting income. So whether you're buying additional home for renting and having rental income, or buying home for fixing it up and investing and flipping it, the idea is that real estate is a great investment because it provides steady income, appreciates in value, and a great way to pass on generational wealth.
That's right.
If folks can just drop in the chat, how many of you have inherited any real estate? Can we see by maybe drops in the chat, anybody out there have inherited real estate?
And that's a really important point that you're talking about, inheritance, right? Again, as we talk about being people of color and inheritances, that's not something that we often have. So that's a very good question that you're asking there, Loretta, about inheritances.
Absolutely, because not that I asked for it, but I've been blessed enough to have inherited 3 properties from family in South Carolina. One in which I rent out, so I have a rental stream of income. One is land that if I want to, I can sell it. And one is the home in which my 96-year-old dad lives in, that he is already perhaps going to pass on to me. The point is that real estate is a great way to pass on generational wealth. And I'm sure there are tons of questions in the chat. So let's see if we can answer some of those.
Yeah, I see a question from Trina Perez to Laura. It says, Laura, what is the most challenging part of owning your own business?
What is the most challenging part? I think the most challenging part is also the best part, is that I don't answer to anybody. I answer to myself. But then if I'm the ultimate answer, then that's a lot of responsibility. I think also, I mean, as we're talking about sort of generational wealth and thinking about families, it's how to manage family, running a business, partners, parents, all of those things. I think it's the same sort of juggle that we all have, honestly, is the hardest part.
Yeah. I see another question from Leanna Wise. Can you speak on the impact of withdrawal from IRAs and investment funds?
Yes, so individual retirement funds are designed for retirement. So there are a lot of penalties associated with individual retirement account if you withdraw money from them before a certain age. So if you withdraw money before you're 59 and a half from an individual retirement account, there are going to be penalties. And the reason for that is they want that vehicle designed to be around for you for your retirement. Now, of course, you may need, it depends on you. If you need that money for life-threatening or something and you have to take it, I'm sure that you'll do that from a personal perspective. But the rule of thumb is that money should stay in there until age 70 and a half. That's when the IRS says if you're in a tax advantage IRA, you can start withdrawing that money without any penalties. But 59 and a half is the age. And if you withdraw that money, there is, I believe, a 10% penalty, and then you're also going to be taxed at whatever your tax bracket is. So if you can avoid withdrawing that money, it's probably financially advantageous to do so.
Great. Laura, I know that, we shared 4 points so far. I know you wanted to share another way to easily build wealth with us.
Sure, I'm the easy tip person for how to build wealth. I also wanted to just go back. Someone had asked a question about 529 plans and if there were any other resources to save for college tuition. Aside from, and maybe Loretta, you can speak on this a little bit. The only other method that I know is the college prepayment. So there's a 521 savings plan, and then there's a prepayment, and you can prepay as little as a semester of college. Which, I mean, if you think about now where you are in your life, if someone had even just paid one semester of your college off, how that would feel. So I think the most important things with those 529 plans or any sort of college savings is not feeling overwhelmed, because the cost is great, but even any dent makes a significant impact. And then kind of keeping with the kid theme, I would say another easy way to build generational wealth that you can start doing tonight at the dinner table is to talk to your kids about personal finance. We started talking about that a little bit earlier, about how just in the Black community, it seems like we haven't really sat down at the table and talked about finances in a way that feels sort of conversational with our kids. But it's one of the things I do. I have 12-year-old twin boys and a 15-year-old girl. And I'm very intentional about talking about finances. Now, I don't want to give off the impression that I'm creating like a slide deck for my children every night, walking them, because I wouldn't do it and they would have none of that. But I'm just very intentional about the things that we talk about, and then I reinforce it. And these are those easy ways. It's all relatively easy because parenting is not necessarily easy, but easier than perhaps investing, looking into investing accounts. That one of the ways is to reinforce consistency. What are your kids responsible for paying for? Even at a young age, what are they responsible for paying for? What are they saving for?
Yeah.
And then the part that speaks to me, how are they donating their money and their time? And is that a part that you're talking about as you're talking about building generational wealth? Because for me, generational wealth means for my family, but also for my community. I want us all to win. So
right.
How are we also impacting community? And not in that way of giving back as some sort of charity, but as a functional part of humanness. How are we also contributing to outside of our family and outside of ourselves, outside of our home? So one of the things that I do with my kids, they have bank accounts. They have had bank accounts since they were very young, just so that they can start managing money, so they can start understanding what things cost. Because you tell a kid like, oh, those sneakers cost, and they're like, what? That's their money. So thinking about what things cost. But then we also just started this year, we gifted the kids for Christmas money to invest. Not a ton, but enough. And there is an app called Greenlight that is so easy to use and allows kids to have a bank account, an online bank account, allows them to invest. And so one of my sons is like, oh yeah, how's your Roblox and your Apple doing today? Like, oh, it's improved mildly. Like we talk about stocks and how they're doing at the table now because they're also involved in it. So just sort of normalizing that so it doesn't feel wild and new when they're adults. And he might be building some generational wealth right now to boot while having fun trading Roblox stocks,
I love that. Listen, we're changing up the dinner time conversations or lunchtime conversations, whatever's happening at the table. And I know that my husband is tuned into this conversation. And so this is for both of us, like just switching up that conversation, really trying to find ways. Like my children are 9 and 10, but how to broach this conversation with them. I think like you're meeting them where they are. Roblox, they're really into that. Amazon, so these are wonderful ways and simple ways to start to have the conversation and to get our kids starting into investing. So I appreciate that. I see another question in the chat. Why is there such a vast racial divide in how people of color approach generational wealth? And how can we help change this mindset? And that's from Anita McRae-Williams.
And I think we're doing that now by simply having the conversation. Yeah. I think this is a first step, Anita, who asked that question, into doing that. And as we said, when we talked about the stock market, the greatest reason, the number one reason is we don't invest in the stock market. And the why to that is is this fair? Is this taboo? A lot of Blacks thinks it's gambling. And it's really about knowledge. It's really about what you don't know. Um, a little bit later, we're going to talk about some good news as it relates to investing in the stock market. But as Laura said, she's having a conversation now with her children
That's
about it.
right.
My kids know about it. It was just not a conversation had at the dinner table. You don't know what you don't know,
Oh,
and you certainly can't be what you can't see. And
yes.
Laura mentioned that in a conversation about teaching her kids and the things that she's doing. I'll share this very, very quickly. When my son, who attended Towson University, which is very close to my office, worked for me in my state farm agency and got all of his license. So he watched his mama, a business owner, slave. I never really thought about what that did to Justin. He was a philosophy major in undergraduate school, went on to get a degree in public policy, so forth and so on. But he is a budding entrepreneur, a technology guru and software. And I was like, what happened to philosophy and social policy? And folks would say to me, why are you surprised, Loretta? Justin worked for you. He saw his mommy as a business owner. So the racial gap, I mentioned that to say this disparity comes from not having the conversation, the education, not seeing you can't be. So we have to start having conversation about it. We have to learn, we have to teach, and we have to get over our fear and just get out there and invest.
That's right. And thank you for that. So see, we have about 9 minutes left. We have a little bit more to chat about, but I also see another question in the chat really quickly from Jean Lewis. What about the low wage earner? Any tips for them?
Well, I mean, I can start, and then Loretta, please take over, because there's been nothing high about my wages, as you know, as I started with kids and and having kids. It was really just about thinking, okay, if I'm going to spend $5 a week, let's say, on a Starbucks, I can put that $5 a week into a college savings plan. I can put that $5 a week into, and this is where Loretta, you might be able to speak to a little bit more, something that is functional and intentional for my children. It doesn't have to be thousands of dollars to start something. I read recently that if a kid has something like $5,000 in their bank account by the time they're 16, and they leave it there, they could have $1 million by the time they're 60. If they put it in a certain account. I mean, so it's less about the amount and more about the consistency and the intention about it.
I could not agree more. Sometimes, if you look up a lot of folks that are millionaires, they're not the wealthiest people or come from wealth. It's about how you handle your money.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think last year when I spoke in Money Matters, we talked about savings and investment and paying yourself first. Always remember to put a little away for yourself. Don't overspend. A lot of thrifty people that don't make a lot of money know how to put away for a rainy day and a nest egg. So low income wage earners, just start small. You don't have to have a lot of money to invest in the stock market. Maybe just buy a few shares. Start off in a savings account and then move up. So there's many ways in which they can do that, Jean. That's a great question.
Very good question. So we've addressed 5 of the best ways on how to build generational wealth. Loretta, I know that there's also a 6th way. So can you share that with us? It's a bit of a drum roll, please.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is life insurance. And that's something that Melody Hobson, who, by the way, not only is a owner of her own minority investment firm, she was the first minority to have a giant, large investment firm. So Melody Hobson we do know a little bit about life insurance. So let's talk about why life insurance can help provide a solid foundation. It's not a policy that you buy and put away in a safe deposit box or tuck it away until somebody passes away. It is an asset that you treat just like a brokerage account or real estate. Having the right life insurance can help shield your investments and it gives you the peace of mind. That is the key to life insurance. It helps you to shield the investments and assets that you have. There are two types of life insurance. There's term life and there's permanent life. Term life, quite simply, is, think about it as a policy that you purchase for a specific reason, for a specific period of time. Term has its advantages and it has a specific reason. The most popular one that comes to mind is mortgage protection. You have a 30-year mortgage and you want to protect that home in the event of death, and you want to buy mortgage protection. That's simply a 30-year term policy, a policy for a specific reason for a specified period of time. The only thing that I would avoid, because term life is very inexpensive, avoid the trap of thinking about term as a lifetime of protection. That's where a lot of people fall short, is they buy term, however, thinking it's for the long haul, and then it's not, because it ends. Permanent life insurance have lifetime value, guaranteed death benefit, cash accumulation, and it gives you a lifetime of protection. The one thing I'm sure most of us can agree on is, if we die unexpectedly, how is our family going to go on? How will their lifestyle continue? How will their quality of life continue? Basically, permanent life rests on shouldering the burdens of one's taking care of their family. So that's why it makes an asset in your portfolio. Think about this. If you're still family with children where you're planning for college or providing for them, and if something were to happen to that breadwinner in the family, how are your kids going to go on to college? I always think of permanent life insurance purchase for loss of income. It helps that family sustain the same quality of life if something were to happen to you. So for this last segment, we're going to focus on just permanent life as a part of wealth building. So why permanent life as a part of wealth building? Because it has a component called cash value. Term does not have that. It has a component that has cash value that grows tax deferred. It is accumulated inside that life policy. So that policy owner can use that cash for living benefits. They can use those funds that are growing in that life insurance policy for emergency funds, college funds, or retirement funds. It is an asset on your balance sheet. So for those investors who are looking for guarantees, if you're a conservative investor, permanent life insurance is a great way to give you some guaranteed cash accumulation. In the event of the death, that death benefit passes on to a beneficiary tax-free. What money asset can you think about that passes on to a beneficiary tax-free? It is a legacy and an affordable asset. You can pass life insurance on to your children and your grandchildren, and I say that life insurance is the cheapest way to pass on generational wealth. A lot of my clients, they are not the color of my skin or your skin, buy huge life insurance policies when their children are born. We talked about the 53% of white Americans that have inherited wealth, while only 23% of Black Americans have inherited wealth. Guess where most of that inherited wealth have come from? Life insurance. Because the beneficiary on that policy inherits that money tax-free and does not have to pay taxes. So it's not a strange conversation to speak of life insurance as an asset. We insure our homes, we insure our cars. We want to make sure we get the maximum protection on them in the event something happens to them. We don't want to lose our homes. We don't want to lose our cars. It is the same thing. You are your greatest asset. Protect yourself for the legacy of your children. I believe there was a graph that was up that showed the asset classes. You probably can't see it, but in the various asset classes, there's a whole diversification of assets. In those assets, there's stocks, there's mutual funds, there's bonds. But the asset protection resources to protect those assets, Thank you. There's the wheel. The red are all of the different asset classes that you invest in. But the gray is the protection resources. That's your life insurance. You want to protect those assets. That is your disability income. That's your Social Security. You want to reduce the impact of the risk on those assets that you have invested so heavily in. So that's where the insurance comes in. If you want to learn more about why life insurance is a valuable asset, I'm sure my website is dropped in the chat just as a resource. Please reach out to me at Loretta Johnson, www.lorettajohnsoninsurance.com. We can certainly give you more information, why it's a valuable asset. It's used a lot for college planning, for retirement planning. There are multiple ways you can use permanent life insurance for.
Great. Thank you so much, Loretta. And we have about another 3 to 4 minutes left. We're going to be over time by about 3 to 4 minutes. So thank you all for sticking with us. So we're going to move now to our closing thoughts. You know that building wealth to last for generations is no easy feat, but it's an admirable undertaking. So Loretta and Laura, can you just share with us some closing thoughts before we say farewell to our friends here?
Absolutely. First of all, I would say, thank you for having us to speak on this conversation. We certainly want to close that racial disparity. The first thing I would say is nail down your retirement saving plan. Get a handle on your current finances so that you're able to lock in the best ways to plan for your children and your grandchildren. If you're not able to sustain your quality of life and be ready for retirement, how are you going to have anything to pass on to your children? So be good steward of your personal finances so that you can do that. Take time to build a wealth building strategy that works for you. Create a plan for the next generation. Build those assets. It gets back to that first question Nita asked, when should I start? Now. Now's the time to start.
And pay off your debt. Get rid of it as fast as you can. And one of the ways that we talked about it was thinking about with your kids. What are ways to set up their college savings? What are ways to look at alternative ways of moving forward without college, without a 4-year degree, but really being intentional about moving your kids through life with as little as debt as possible.
And you got to create a plan. You got to be able to make sure those policies or those 401k plans, those life insurance policies, those mutual funds. When is the last time you looked at your beneficiaries? Have you updated your beneficiary? For those of you who are caregivers, who are taking care of your elderly, do they have life insurance plans? Do they have investment plans? Who are their beneficiaries? Take the time to make sure that they are protected. Estate planning. I know there were a lot of questions that came in and we couldn't answer them all as it relates to taxes, but I would say this as it comes to taxes, please consult an accountant. Laura and I are not accountants, but there are a lot of tax implications on things that we are discussing. Wills. Oh, I mean, we can go on and on. You have to create a plan in order to pass on your assets. Custodial accounts. Take the time to you build these assets, whether there's real estate. Take the time to create a plan in terms of how you want to pass it on.
Thank you all so much. On behalf of Iota Lambda Omega's chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, Building Your Economic Legacy Committee, the committee's co-chair, Nona Carroll, and program chair, Dr. Angela Williams, we thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you for allowing us to go a few minutes over. Please take a moment to let us know how you thought tonight's session went by completing the survey link that should be dropped in the chat any minute now. And also, you'll be able to find all of our Money Matter Monday sessions for the month of April on Iota Lambda Omega's chapter's Facebook page. And again, thank you for joining us and have a great evening. We appreciate it. Night.
Thank you.